Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Gurney Mulholland. I'm the Dean of the School of Business and Applied Social Sciences. And I want to welcome all of you to this phenomenal event for our Holy Names University students who will be the stars of today's performance. We look forward to having you. I'm going to be very, very brief. I'm proud, I'm thrilled, and I have the thankfulness in all my heart to Dr. Talia Moore and to Professor Melanie Parker for their leadership in providing the collaboration and coordination that it takes to put an event on this, like this on. At this point, we're going to share some information.
No, what do you know about the 3 C's?
Well, it means conscious, critical, and be a contributor.
Anyway, personally, I was most interested by the contribution part. I feel like one of the big problems about racism is that it's everywhere.
And also that it's been around for so long.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, at this point, it's basically inevitable to avoid as a person of color. So many stories in Tell Me Who You Are relate that, like, for simply existing, these people face some kind of discrimination.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked at all the stories that were told in the book. I didn't think there were so many hidden in the dark.
I remember one story in particular about this woman named Evelyn who was like saying that our government needs to create some kind of community forum where like proactive discussion could take place, specifically amongst like different groups of people in a peaceful and open-minded way.
Thank you all for hanging in there with our tech issues, and hopefully you are able to get some information and connect to the video. My name is Dr. Talia Moore, and I had the privilege of being a part of orchestrating this first annual environmental research symposium. Racism plagues every facet and system of American life. You may choose to argue with the statement and even provide your own examples of its non-existence. But is that truly being void of racism, or does your privilege protect you from it? The students in the video referenced the 3 C's: conscious, critical, and contribution. Let's discuss this a little bit further. What does it mean to be conscious? Is this synonymous with being woke, informed and aware of the issues and challenges experienced as a result of racism and its existence? Is being conscious being aware of your place in society and how you choose to leverage your power? Conscious of how your actions and words impact others, either for good or for bad? Conscious of the historical trauma experienced by those subjected to discriminatory practices? And conscious of the systems still in place to relegate individuals into race-based caste systems, determining an individual's social value based solely on their melanin content. The next C is critical. Critical can be expressed in several varying ways. One could assess the impact of racism on people and determine that we are at a critical time and space where changes need to come to ensure equal and equitable treatment of everyone. Critical could also reflect the need to evolve to ensure the success of the human race. And by doing so, it's critical that we make decisions to walk away from racism and the existence of systems that support it. Critical could also reflect thinking skills and how we individually move either to reinforce or disband racist talk, thought, and action. And critical can be applied in how we assess the totality, severity, and prevailing existence of racism in America. The final C is contribute. Contributions are our personal gifts, talents, modes of information transmission and creation powered by intention. Contributions come in all sizes and can come from all people. These contributions move the discussions along, move the agenda, and move the people in ways to produce real change. You may question how you can contribute How will you work towards ensuring racial equity and equality? It can be in many forms. Attending a symposium on environmental racism, being a student presenter in a symposium on environmental racism, encouraging your class or classes to be present, and you being present here and ready to connect. Your contributions could be writing a book or a paper about ending racism, or simply come in the form of a correction to a racist or erroneous comment in a conversation. Wherever and however, we are all able to contribute. And so we come full circle back to the students' conversation. They spoke of the need to create a forum where proactive discussion can take place. Here it is. The need to bring the community together and look at the HNU community showing up and showing out in a peaceful way, not at odds with each other, but open and receptive to the information at hand. And here we go. The student presenters understood the assignment. Yes, they did. Topics covered today will explore racism and how its presence impacts policies, enforcement, access to basic necessities like clean air and water, who is important enough to be covered in the news, and the conditions migrant workers encounter to bring food to your table, just to name a few. Today, our presenters will explore racism in many spaces, share personal accounts of discrimination, and identify practices and systems needing an overhaul. You are encouraged to lean in, listen, and learn. And from this day forward, encouraged to move forward with intentional thought and action in addressing and responding to racism, racist practices in every system and space that you occupy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Appreciate it.
For the people, why can't everyone just not be racist, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and with that, I try to teach my little nephew to not be like that. And so he doesn't have to be in the position where he needs to unlearn certain things. So whenever I get the chance, if he has a little comment or something that's negative, I try to remind him like, hey, that's not okay. And if he ever slips out somehow a racial slur, I let him know like that's just not okay. With kids, they don't really know what they're doing. They just repeat what they hear. So if you send the right message, they can pick it up like a sponge. And overall, the main point is to help others. And with reading this book and learning all this new knowledge, I can't help but feel obligated to like pass it on.
Thank you again, Dr. Moore. Appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for being here. By being here together, we're making a significant change. So thank you for being a part of that. I would like to call something out. Believe it or not, I have white privilege. This means that my perspective is limited. Even though I'm trying to learn about race, my perspective will not be enough to fully understand the point of view of a person of color. And this is really strange because I identify as biracial. Still, because I'm most likely perceived as white, I cannot fully realize the experiences of those who are perceived as people of color. I'm hoping to continue to learn about race with everyone here at Holy Names University and at the symposium. I know there are going to be some great presentations today. And some of you may ask, why is the symposium called Environmental Racism when the presentations seem to just focus on racism in general? Well, we're talking about the broader term of environment, which could be somebody's neighborhood, home, or culture. We could be talking about a discourse community like in a classroom or symposium, a place where we have revelations about race, and I hope we do. Another problem with the term environment is how corporations and utilities spend enormous amounts of money making us feel separate from our environment. Like if there's air pollution in the environment, we'll just close our doors and windows and we'll be fine, right? Well, what if we can't breathe inside or out? George Floyd couldn't. I want you to realize that we are always a part of our environment, whether or not we feel connected to it. The environment could be the globe, our neighborhood, the galaxy. We can't get too far from that. The last problem is how folks may not connect the access to healthcare and access to nutritious food to environmental racism. But it's exactly that. My student, Alana Felix, wrote in an essay last semester about the Black Lives Matter movement. She said, although some people who say all lives matter come from a good place, saying this phrase takes away from the lives who are in danger, which are Black lives. So when you're home in your bed sleeping and the FBI breaks down your door, shoots and kills you before identifying you, how can you get away from that kind of racism? Another example of environmental racism I got from our common reading book in the FYE program called Tell Me Who You Are. When meteorologists warn white neighborhoods and not Black or Hispanic neighborhoods that a storm is coming, this is environmental racism. In this case, it didn't even occur to the meteorologists to warn those minority neighborhoods of the flash flood. They just didn't think about it. The simple oversight is a threat to our civility and our way of life. Multiply this situation by newsrooms across the country and across the world, and this is one of the reasons why we are here today. Next, I would like to introduce our opening speaker. She is a psychology major in her second year here. She has worked as a poll worker assisting voters in the voting process. She volunteers at the San Francisco campus for Jewish Living. And she's trilingual in English, Cantonese, and Toisanese. Also, she's just an incredibly kind person. Please, everyone, welcome Kimberly Yee.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Yee. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Yee, and I'm a second-year student at Holy Names University. I wrote this paper in my spring semester of Professor Parker's English 1B class. During that time was when hate crimes against Asian Americans was at its peak, which inspired me to write this research paper. For this paper, we were asked to come up with the inquiry question, and I decided on what's it like living in a time of increasing hate crimes against Asian Americans. So this is what I came up with. If someone ever tries to steal anything from you, let them have it. Your life is more valuable than what is being taken away from you. That item is replaceable. Your life isn't. That is something my dad would constantly tell me since I was a little girl. Since I was just 10 years old, I've learned to fear for my life. He would explain to me that because I was Chinese, some people wouldn't like me, so they would try and hurt me. But for what? Just because my facial features are different from others? Asian Americans have been looked down upon for many, many years, and very few people have ever touched on this issue. With COVID-19, there has been an uprising of hate crimes against Asian Americans around the United States. My community is hurting, but it feels like no one is listening. We are in a place of fear and are forced to stay home. We can't even step outside of our house without having the possibility of someone coming up to us and taking out their hatred on us. COVID-19 has revealed long-held prejudices against Asian Americans in American society. Many people in the United States regard the virus as foreign and condemn those who spread it phenotypically as the spreaders of the virus. A person of Asian descent is often presumed to be an immigrant, visitor, foreigner. Just because we are seen as foreigners does not mean we do not have the right to live. My parents fought so hard to immigrate to the United States for a better life and to start a family. I have watched my parents put their blood, sweat, and tears into their jobs to give me the education I need. I have watched them give up so much of their time to provide for my sister and I, and seeing them work so hard motivates me to do well in school and all that I do. For so many years, I was ashamed of my race because we were always belittled and seen as less than humans. When someone would ask what my race was, I would be too embarrassed to tell them. I am tired of keeping quiet. I've been silent for too long. I just want my community to be seen and treated as humans. But blaming Asians as a cause for the virus is not going to make it disappear. Because the coronavirus is described as foreign, people have taken those feelings and expressed it as xenophobia, violence or hatred against people outside of the country. In the article, The Anxiety of Being Asian, the authors Hannah Tesler, Mira Choi, and Grace Cow stated, 80% of the self-reported anti-Asian incidents have taken place outside people's private residences, in grocery stores, local businesses, and public places. This means that anyone is susceptible to this type of violence at any time. It does not matter where you are. There are so many times throughout the day where I worry if my grandparents are going to encounter this type of violence. My grandpa enjoys going on his daily walks around his neighborhood in the outer Mission. Even though I only live 3 minutes away from him, I constantly have this worry in the back of my head that something bad might happen. It's painful to just sit at home and watch these hate crimes occur in my own city through social media. I feel helpless. How can I be assured that my grandparents are safe? These acts of violence have happened to so many other Asian American elders that have the same features as my own grandparents. It is so sad to say, but how soon will it be until this happens to my own grandparents or anyone else's grandparents or relatives? If we don't put an end to this now, it is just a matter of time until someone acts out on their xenophobia and attacks another Asian American elder. The New York Police Department reported that hate crimes motivated by anti-Asian sentiment jumped 1,900% in New York City in 2020. 1,900%. It is outrageous to me that the percentage is so high, but nothing is being done. I cannot comprehend how disturbing it is and how people could just stand around as these types of hate crimes are occurring. Why aren't people supporting Asian Americans the same way they supported Black Lives Matter? We are all minorities and should be given the same amount of support. On March 16th, 2020, 8 people, including 6 Asian women, were shot dead in a shooting spree at 3 Asian-owned day spas in Acworth and Atlanta in Georgia. When I heard the news, I was shocked, but not really shocked at the same time. I knew something like this would have happened. It was only just a matter of time. These past few months have been so hard to process, and I don't think I will ever be able to fully digest what has been happening to the Asian American community. On that day, so much was lost. A son, a daughter, a mother, a father, a husband, a sister, lost an important woman in their life. I cannot imagine what these families must have felt and what they must be going through, but all I know is that these hate crimes need to end now. I have seen Asian people struggle and face discrimination time and time again, and constantly be silenced because we should be grateful to live in a better country. There was another incident that happened earlier this year on Market Street in San Francisco. San Francisco is my home. It's where I've grown up and met all my friends and family. This hate crime hit so close to home because my parents knew of the elderly woman who was attacked. The video that was posted on social media showed the elderly woman holding a bat in one hand and the other hand holding an ice pack over her eye. In the same video, you can see the person who attacked her on a stretcher. Her bravery stood out to me so much. She beat the attacker to the point where he had to take a trip to the hospital. She then began to ask the man, "You bum, why did you hit me?" Hearing her speak in Cantonese really hit me and brought me to tears. Her voice reminded me so much of my own grandma, and I began to ask myself, what if this were my own grandma? What would I do? Right now, it feels as if my job is to protect my grandparents. They spent a good amount of their time taking care of me and protecting me, and it is only right if I do the same for them. Thank you.
Maybe pushing for educating the youth about, everyone's story, maybe putting this book into other people's hands, and, maybe implement a curriculum that shows the racism happening around, just to make sure, most people can be educated and others can be better.
Yeah.
So before we move on to our next activity, just a quick little poll just to see how you guys are doing. Have any of you ever joined a breakout room before? We're going to be joining our breakout rooms very shortly. And am I still sharing my screen? Let's see, share screen. There we go. So here's a picture of us. I just took it recently during Kim Yee's phenomenal presentation. And so this is a picture of us at the very bottom right. Do you see of the window, do you see the option that says breakout rooms? If you've never done it before, here's the little icon with the 4 tiles for breakout rooms. If you click that, as soon as we open it, you'll go ahead and click on this option and then join the 3 different breakout rooms, which we'll be hosting soon. Okay. So Talia, is there anything you'd like to share before I open them?
No, we are good to transition.
All righty. So Talia, I'll be assigning you to the room 1 right now.
Breakout room.
Sorry?
Don't have a symbol for breakout room on our screen.
Okay, 1 second. If there's any issues, please do hold on, and then I can go ahead and assign you as well very quickly. For those of you who have seen it before or do see it, go ahead and join once I open the rooms.
Something else that can help prevent missing white girl syndrome in the future is bringing awareness to media organizations and law enforcement, as well with the public. Because if we're not tuning into the news or sharing the stories that come up on our social media, they wouldn't receive the attention that they do. White women, their friends, and family are the ones who are benefiting from the attention that their stories get from the media and the public. They benefit from the priority that law enforcement places on their cases as well. Meanwhile, people of color are the ones being negatively impacted because their family members are being overlooked in order to bring closure to the cases that have caught all of our attention in our city, state, and our nation. Media organizations are profiting. The more popular a story becomes, the more clicks and views they get on their websites. Learning about missing white girl syndrome and spreading awareness about it is important because cases are being overlooked and they aren't giving the same amount of time and effort. While one family is relieved to receive news about their lost loved one, another family is struggling to get through their days, wondering whether or not their lost loved one is alive or dead. Missing white girl syndrome might not be affecting us directly right now, but one day it might. That person who is being overlooked could one day be your neighbor, friend, family member, or coworker. And just remember that when you decide to share the story of a missing white girl on social media, but decide to overlook the one of the missing woman of color. To further my research today, I have created 4 research questions. The first one is, how do people of color perceive the media? How does the media portray people of color? How does the media cover other crimes against people of color versus white people? And the last one, where does the media get its information to report on stories? The media is a very powerful thing, both social media and news organizations. Stories are shared every day, but when it comes to people missing, the white woman gets the most attention. Their stories are spread from coast to coast, and law enforcement gets right on it to solve their case. But while their cases are being solved and read about all over the nation, someone else has gone missing. Somebody else is being overlooked. I hope that we can take the information that we have learned today to raise awareness and educate those around us. Thank you.
All right, good job, Maria. Good job. Now we are all going to move into a space for question and answers. If there's anyone in the room who has a comment or question in response to Maria's presentation, now is your opportunity to pose a question. All right, well, I have a question. Actually, I have 4 questions for you. And they're your research questions. If you could come up with a response to each of the research questions that you presented, can you kind of walk through that thought process and what your response would be?
So the first one, how do people of color perceive the media? My response, I think, would be that the people of color maybe don't like the media. Personally, I think that it might be because, you know, with missing white girl syndrome, the way that people of color are portrayed in the media will cause them to not see the media as their friend or something that they are very fond of. For the second one, how does the media portray people of color? I think that a lot of times they portray them as people who are dangerous and criminals. I personally believe that when people of color do receive attention in the media, it's really sometimes when they're like, they're being accused of a crime. Like, this person committed this crime, they killed this white woman, they killed this white man, or when it's like a drug bust or something that is negative, that's how they portray people of color. For my third one, how does the media cover other crimes against people of color versus white people? How would I respond to this one? I think that it would be very similar to missing white girl syndrome. When crimes of violence are done against people of color, you know, they're not really given the same attention as well as when white people are being hurt. I know that there was a story about this teenage boy in school who he was being bullied, and his story didn't receive as much attention as it would for somebody who was white. I think it would just be very similar to missing white girl syndrome. Any other crime that would be done to a person of color just wouldn't get the same attention as a crime being done against a white person. And then I think my last one, where does the media get its information to report on stories? I think that it comes from different places. One of them being law enforcement. I think that sometimes people in law enforcement tip media organizations. and also from the public once they see things, if they want it to be on the media and get the attention that it gets. It really just comes from the public as well, calling and saying that they want this story to be, on the news tonight, or they want it to receive attention. So yeah.
Good job. Yeah. All right. Very thoughtful responses. Any other questions? Well, one other question from me. What made you decide to select this topic? Because the title alone, and I see my dean typed the great title, but it's very powerful and catchy. So how did you come to this topic and then this title as well?
So the topic, I chose it because during this time that we were starting to do the research for class, it was a little while after the case of Gabby Petito, the missing white girl who she was traveling with her boyfriend or her fiance, and she ended up dead. So it was around that time, but along with her case going very national, there was also a lot of criticism to the fact that, there was a lot of attention for her case, but a lot of the time when people of color go missing, they don't receive the same attention as well. I know there was a case about a girl who was, I think she was in the army. She went missing. Her name was Vanessa, and there was not a lot of attention on her case as well. Her case, I think, received minimal attention compared to the case of Gabby Petito. So that's why I chose to do this one, just because the Gabby Petito case was really fresh in my mind, and I was just reading a lot of criticism about it in social media. And then for the title, I didn't really put a lot of thought into my title. It was kind of just, I just came up with it to, it went around with everything that I was talking about, missing white girl syndrome. And I do focus a lot in my presentation about the effects that it has on people of color. So that's how I came up with my title.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I don't know if there's any other questions from anyone else in the room. Well, moving forward. Oh,
I did have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Ahliyah. Go ahead.
What more do you think can be done in terms of how the media navigates putting the spotlight on other individuals who have gone missing, especially when it comes to minority women? So Black, Hispanic, Indigenous women. What do you think can be more done in highlighting their disappearances in the same way they highlight a white woman's disappearance?
I feel that if maybe news organizations were a little bit more diverse, they would be pushing out these cases of minority women as much as they do white women. Like I've noticed that a lot of media organizations are heavily white, both male and female. So I think that if there was more diversity in them as well, they would push those cases just as much as they do white women. But I also think that it really comes down to training people in media organizations as well. Like unconscious bias training and more diversity training, I think would really change things.
Thank you for that question. Are there any other questions to our presenter in regards to her topic? All right, well, I have one more. Moving forward, right? Because if we're being solution focused and moving in that direction, you kind of spoke to what we can do to bring awareness to this, but are there any other suggestions that you can point out that we can move this forward in news, in law enforcement, and other community or other organizations? Do you have any ideas on how we could?
I think I spoke about training and training. I think that as a community, what we can do is, I think a lot of the times when people of color don't get the same attention as white women, there's always that question of, well, why isn't this person getting the same attention? I know in my family, that was a big question when Vanessa went missing. It was that question of, you know, like, why isn't her story getting all this national attention? And it's like, if our communities aren't coming together to create that national attention of our people as well, you know, they're not going to really get that attention. So like, if we're not showing that we care about them too, you know, the media is probably going to be asking, you know, why should we even be pushing the story if in communities they're not even wondering or trying to fight or trying to find what's going on with this person. So I think as a community, what we can do is come together to try and garnish the same attention that these white women receive. And then just in ourselves, you know, like in social media, you come across these stories, like people share them on their story or they post them on their Instagram feed. And a lot of the times it's really easy to just, you know, keep scrolling or go on to the next story and not pay attention to it, because you're probably just wondering, well, it's not really going to do anything at the end of the day. But I remember sharing Gabby's case before it was even national news. And sooner rather than later, I just kept seeing her story all over. So I think that if we ourselves, you know, stopped overlooking those cases on social media and just started sharing them, you really don't know how much help that is to the family who is looking for that person. But I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. All right. Any other questions? Okay, I guess not. You've answered everything. There's nothing left, no rock left to turn over at this point. Okay, so what we can do is everybody can go back and transition back to the host room, and the next presentation will start in a couple of minutes, actually. Maria, were you going to say something, Maria? Oh, but before we leave the room, I would be remiss if I did not request and actually demand one last round of applause and recognition for Maria's outstanding performance and presentation. Did I say she's my student? All right, little bias here. Thank you all. Thank you, Maria. Go ahead and make your transitions, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next Zoom room and group sessions as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Muskann, and I will be sharing my research about the impact of Flint's deadly water. To start off, I want to give you all an overview of what happened in Flint's water crisis. In April of 2014, a man-made public health crisis began in Flint, Michigan. This story of environmental injustice started when the city made the decision to switch its water supply. The city of Flint made a switch from Detroit's water system to the Flint River in attempts to save more money. When they made the switch, they did not adequately treat or test the water, which resulted in poor water quality and health issues for the Flint residents. The residents complained to their government officials that the water was discolored, smelled foul, and had an odd taste. The water also caused skin rashes, hair loss, and itchy skin, but unfortunately, these complaints and issues were ignored by the government. On the slide, there's a picture that compares the Flint water and the Detroit water, and we can see a huge difference in the water quality. The city and state government continuously reassured the Flint residents that the water was safe, but they never tested the water to prove that it is up to standard. When the water was finally tested, they found that the water supply was contaminated with high levels of lead and a bacteria that causes Legionnaire's disease. According to the CDC, lead can enter drinking water when a chemical reaction occurs in plumbing materials containing lead, which is known as corrosion. There's a picture of 3 pipes, and those are just a few of the corroded pipes from the Flint water plant. Lead exposure can cause neurological issues, and contaminated water is especially dangerous for children because their growing brains and bodies are more susceptible to lead poisoning. Legionnaire's disease is a severe and deadly form of pneumonia, which is caused by Legionella, which can sicken people when they drink or breathe droplets of contaminated water. This crisis lasted for 18 months before the government switched the water supply back to the Detroit system. However, by that point, over 100,000 residents were already exposed to high levels of lead, and a Legionnaire's disease outbreak occurred, which reportedly sickened at least 90 people and killed 12. There was also a research study that suggested that there could have been a higher death count than initially reported. There was an estimate of about 115 possible deaths related to the Legionnaire's disease outbreak. So, how do we know that racism was the issue? We know that racism was the issue when we look at who was affected by the water crisis. According to the US Census Bureau, the demographics of Flint is that 57% of the residents are African Americans and about 45% of the residents live below the poverty line. We know that racism was the issue because the poor and delayed response from the government was a result of systemic racism. If this city was predominantly white like the rest of Michigan, the response from the government would have been much more efficient and effective. Now, who is at fault for the water crisis? This crisis happened because the city decided to activate an old water treatment plant that hadn't been used in 50 years to supply water for Flint residents. Additionally, the state did not require the plant to protect the city's water pipes from the corrosion, which spread lead and Legionella from the water to the residents. The state and local government are to blame. They ignored, overlooked, and discounted issues with the water supply and did not listen to the public or scientists' concerns. Additionally, the government failed to report this issue to the public as soon as possible, which resulted in prolonging Flint residents' exposure to contaminated water. There are many ways that this could have been prevented. The first way it could have been prevented was by testing and treating the Flint River water supply before making the switch. They also could have ensured that the water plant was up to date and had the resources it needed to put out safe water. Another way would have been listening to and addressing the public's concerns about the water. The government had many chances to test the water to prove to the public that it was safe, but they decided not to. And the last way it could have been prevented was if the government told the public immediately that the water was contaminated. Then the residents could have avoided using the water and exposing themselves to lead and a dangerous bacteria that would lead to health issues. If something similar to this occurs in the future, we should make sure that the government takes all the right steps before implementing a switch in the water supply, such as testing and treating the water. We should also make sure that old water plants are updated to ensure the safety of the water before using them and not rushing this transition. And lastly, and most importantly, we should hold people accountable for the roles that they played in this crisis. This crisis has an estimated amount that the federal government could end up paying $300 billion to clean up Flint's water supply, and the city itself paying $400 million. Now, I want to talk about how this issue impacted the parties involved. Initially, the state and city benefited because they were going to save money on water supply expenses. It was estimated that the city would have saved about $2 million by making the switch, which was important for a city like Flint, which is very impoverished. However, the water crisis ended up costing them much more money. Unfortunately, Flint residents are the only ones who lose in this situation. To this day, many of them still do not drink or trust the water supply, even though it has been fixed. A lot of the Flint residents are still dealing with health issues that were related to the water crisis as well. This is an important issue because this form of environmental racism could have been easily avoided. As I stated before, this was a man-made public health crisis that impacted African Americans and those who live below the poverty line the most. We should care because having access to clean and safe water is a basic human right, and no one should have to worry about being poisoned through the water that they drink. Also, the Flint residents are still dealing with the effects of the water crisis and no one has been held liable. When I was doing my research, I came up with a few research questions, which are the following. Why did the government not respond fast enough to this issue? How did the lead in the water supply affect residents and does it still affect them today? Why did the government insist that the water was safe when they did not properly test it? And what aid has been provided to the Flint residents to recover from this crisis? I personally would like to explore more about why the state and local government tried to hide the lead in the water and the Legionnaires outbreak. And I also hope to learn more about the ways the Flint residents were affected by the lead and the outbreak and some of the long-term effects on the community. The way I will apply this information from my research is that I will use what I learned to understand the impact of environmental racism and see what we can do to minimize and prevent it. I would also apply this information in my daily life by becoming more aware of these issues of environmental racism. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let's give her an applause, a Zoom applause if we can, which is you put your hands up. Yeah, or you can put some messages in the chat. Next, I would like to invite anybody to ask questions from that presentation. So you can unmute yourself or you can go ahead and put it in the chat. And I know that some people weren't able to see the whole presentation because some people were coming in later, but that's okay. You are still allowed to ask questions or make comments.
Anyway, I'm really glad you did the research. I am a daughter of Flint. I lived there until I was 12 years old. And wow. I have been there in the past 5 or 6 years during the whole water crisis. So one of my concerns, well, we got a lot of concerns. First, I'm just like still furious that it even happened. But just recently, there's a settlement and they're going to pay some, reparations to the people that are in Flint, but I don't think it's enough necessary. So I was just curious if you had heard about that. And then there's another community in Michigan that's having the same experience. It's predominantly African-American and their water situation is the same. And so it's like, well, you just went through this with Flint. Why in the world are you letting this happen in other communities? Those are questions you can't answer, but that's stuff that I think all of us need to be paying attention to. And even though we live here, writing letters to elected officials or writing an article about it here is an important thing to do so people understand how pervasive this really is. So thank you for your work.
All right. Any response?
Sorry, I was muted. I did see that article about the settlement, and I also researched a little bit about like a lawsuit charging certain people, but there wasn't really anything done. Nobody was really held liable, and I feel like, again, like I said in my presentation, this entire thing could have been avoided, and it was a really big issue that I personally don't think was addressed well enough. Wasn't really brought to the media that much either. And so I agree that like, even if there is going to be a settlement and the amount of money that they give, it's not going to change what really happened. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
How did you even know to look into this? I mean, how did you choose this particular research subject?
Well, we, as a class, we had to choose like a topic about environmental racism. And I realized I did not know much about like Flint in general. I remember hearing about it when it happened, but I didn't, like, as I was researching it, I like found so many things and I became really interested about how it impacted the residents there, because I feel like we did not get to see their point of view. We only got to see what the media showed. So I liked to hear the stories from them.
Very good.
Nice. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments? We have a couple of minutes until we need to start our next presentation. I have a question. If That's okay. Did you, in your research, did you come across anything about the neurological effects on children for the lead poisoning?
I did kind of see that it really affected a lot of children. I believe during that time there was about 4,000 children in Flint, a little bit more than that. And it does affect their development because it affects their entire body. Lead affects everybody's bodies. But I didn't research too much like specifically about the neurological effects, but I remember that there were a couple of articles that address that topic too.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we have a question in the chat. Michelle is asking, do you have any ideas of what you would suggest to the people that made these decisions to help these communities as they help the communities they endanger? Sorry.
I think first holding the people accountable is important, but I feel like, again, there's nothing they could really have done now, like to fix this issue. They should have thought about the people when they made the decision to switch the water. That's one thing that I might not have stated. The city did not like vote for this switch in the water. They made the decision without the community's like vote or anything. So I think they need to start making these decisions with the community and not for the community, what they think is right for them. So I would say that's the best way.
Yeah, very insightful. Thank you. I appreciate you wrestling with the answers, and they're not easy questions, right? These aren't easy questions because it's a very difficult situation that the government puts their residents in. Okay, thank you so much. Let's give her another hand. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about the issue of racial disparity in the juvenile justice system. Racial disparities in the juvenile justice system, more commonly known as disproportionate minority contact, also the DMC, are the overrepresentation, disparity, and disproportionate numbers of youth of color entering and moving deeper into the juvenile justice system. There has been some legislative attention to the issue since the implementation of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act of 1974, and most recently with the attempts in 2017 to reauthorize the act, originally focused solely on confinement, and it became clear by 1988 there was disproportionality at all decision points in the juvenile justice system, and the focus changed to contact. The DMC most commonly is known to impact Black and Hispanic youth, but a closer look reveals how other youth of color are also impacted. And numerous factors have been previously identified that create DMC, but increasingly factors such as zero tolerance in schools and proactive policing in communities are continuing to negatively impact reduction efforts. And emerging these issues indicate the need to consider society's demographic changes and the criminalization of spaces often occupied by youth of color and gender difference when creating and implementing strategies to reduce the DMC. Pretty much research has noted the major disparities in the extent of involvement and of minority youth, particularly Black youth, compared with white youth in the juvenile justice system. So the existence of disproportionality racial representation in the juvenile justice system raises questions about fundamental fairness and equality of treatment of these youth by the police, courts, and other personnel connected with the juvenile justice system. With my research, I found 2 peer-reviewed studies documented an alarming and unequal juvenile justice system, particularly for Black youth. And the studies point to systematic responses that result in harsher treatment of youth of color, especially Black youth, than non-Hispanic white youth at the front end of the juvenile justice system, starting with police encounters and before young people even reach to high school. So glaring disparities by race and ethnicity persist according to these studies, and difference in behavior cannot account for the representation of youth of color in the justice system. There is a quote from this article that states that all young people should be able to mature into adulthood without being thrown off track by the negative effects of justice system involvement, says Jaquita Monroe, a senior associate with the Casey Foundation. And the more the research tells us about the systematic bias that disproportionately harming Black, Latino, and other youth of color, the more urgent it becomes to address predictable adolescent misbehaviors. And pretty much Monroe leads this foundation's work with jurisdictions to significantly expand their use of diversion, which means holding youth accountable for their behavior without resorting to legal sanctions. Black youth, as stated before, are represented at every stage of the juvenile justice system, and the experience have worse outcomes. For example, when charged with the same offense, they are more likely to be detained and for longer periods of the time than their white counterparts. So race has even been shown to be a predictor of the type of setting the youth who have been addicted will be referred to. Color youth are much more likely than white youth to be referred for confinement. So Black youth have been shown to be more likely to be referred to boot camps and wilderness programs, and while white youth are more often referred to drug and alcohol programs, mental health treatment, or diversion programs. So now the DMC occurring in the juvenile justice system continues to exist and persist because of how youth of color are perceived. And the negative portraits of youth of color combined with practices such as intense and more frequent policing in their neighborhoods continue to contribute to the DMC. So until the actual impact of race is understood, it is likely that the DMC will continue to manifest. Focusing on the initial contact between the police and youth of color is an appropriate stage to be in because it is where the perceptions of the youth begin. So data enter into the permanent record shapes how a youth is perceived at each sequence stage by other officials in the juvenile justice system. And pretty much with this information, one of my research questions is what has to be done from us as a community so that the power of injustices in the juvenile justice system goes down. I'm sorry. What I have learned while doing this research is that as long as the juvenile justice system conflates a youth perceived personal needs and challenges with actual risk to public safety, youth of color will be criminalized and erroneously move into the juvenile justice system, and the DMC will continue to increase. So finally, judges must work to ensure that their decisions are not being made by their own implicit biases, and as they move their give me 1 second. Okay, so finally, judges must work. Finally, judges must work to ensure that their decisions are not being influenced by their own implicit biases, and as they make their decisions, they must consider whether the key decision makers who engage with the youth before them influenced by the implicit biases. And finally, I would like to say that I hope we can take this information and spread around in our daily lives. Not forget about what is actually happening. Thank you, and we can go ahead and do the questions now.
All right, well, thank you, Bernice, for your presentation. I think the dog in the background is also giving you, applause as well. So thank you for the information. At this time, are there any questions for Bernice in regards to any of the information presented? Or just in response to her presentation overall?
I think you did a really good job, and there's some things that I had not thought about, the way you explained the different participants, as I call it, in terms of how they're victimized and victimized by a system that's supposed to be helping them, which is like not the case. So I just thought you presented things really well. The terms were clear. We all need to be inspired to figure out, again, what can we do? And actually, I thought the dog was taking your side too. I thought it was a nice little punctuation, so to speak.
I concur. I think the dog was definitely in support of what she was talking about. Yeah. Any other questions or comments in response to Bernice's presentation? All right, it seems as if they're just going to marinate on that information, Bernice, so thank you for that. Julia, you can go ahead and get your slide together, and then we'll go ahead and transition to Julia's presentation.
So first, I would like to say to my classmate Bernice, you had a great presentation, so good job. And good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Garcia, and the topic I will be presenting on is the effects of mass incarceration and the reentry challenges for formerly incarcerated. To start off, I would like to explain when the prison population began to rise. The United States experienced a rise in incarceration during the mid-1970s. Population size in jails increased dramatically. It led to an era of mass incarceration. Mass incarceration refers to the unique way that the United States has locked up a vast population in federal and state prisons, as well as local jails. After serving time in prison, ex-offenders are released with significant and ongoing economic and societal obstacles that often prevent them from thriving. This indirectly pushes them back to crime and back into our prison systems. According to the Library of Congress, within 3 years of release, 67.8% of ex-offenders are rearrested, and within 5 years, 76.6% are rearrested. With more than 2 million people incarcerated in the United States, recidivism harms both the families of inmates and society in general, as taxpayers continue to support a broken system that sets ex-offenders up to fail once they are released. To visualize this number of people incarcerated, refer to the picture on the slide, which shows that the United States holds 4% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. Many employers refuse to hire ex-convicts, and systemic collateral consequences restrict tens of thousands of ex-offenders' legal rights, which essentially extends their punishment and inhibits their inability to function as normal citizens. Collateral consequences refers to the legal and regulatory restrictions that limit or prohibit people convicted of crimes from accessing employment, business, and occupational licensing, housing, voting, education, and other rights, benefits, and opportunities. This is an ongoing issue that occurs everywhere throughout the US and affects men and women equally. Based on the populations affected most by mass incarceration, which are African Americans and Latinos that present a high risk of imprisonment. Almost half, about 49% of African American males will be arrested by their 23rd birthday. 38% of whiter males will have been arrested by that age. This is a race issue because the majority of the prison population is overwhelmed by people of color. As these minority groups are released, they also face the challenges of trying to catch up with society. This issue occurred as a result of the government's inability to properly assess policies whose purpose was supposed to be resolved, but ended up being a double-edged sword that worsened our prison systems throughout these years. The rise in prison population increased during the 1970s when politicians used the public sphere towards violent crime to push policies. Nixon started this trend by declaring a war on drugs and justified this with speeches about being tough on crime. This declaration continued with the Reagan administration. The war on drugs during the Reagan administration roughly translated to a war on crack cocaine, which led to the first federal mandatory selecting guidelines for drug possession. This also led to a racial disparity in who was using or handling these drugs and who was incarcerated. During the Reagan administration, the prison population exploded tremendously, and this rise impacted communities of color the hardest. They were disproportionately incarcerated then and remain so today. A few other policies that increased incarceration rates include the 1994 crime bill, which was heavily supported by a current president, which gives states money to perpetuate policies, which led to increases in prison populations. These types of issues could have been prevented if the government took more precautions when creating policies that increase sentencing for certain crimes. Systemic policies that offer little or no support for prisoners that aim to integrate themselves into society. If they don't have support or opportunities, then they fall back into their crime patterns in order to make a living. The challenges facing ex-offenders are systematic and require policy changes to shift away from the attitude that punishment should continue after sentences have been served. Ban the Box is a national campaign against continued punishment in hiring that calls for employers to remove the box on applications that requires applicants to disclose criminal records. President Obama called on the federal government to support this campaign in 2015, and he quoted this: "The federal government should not use criminal history to screen out applicants before we even look at their qualifications. It is relevant to find out whether somebody has a criminal record. We're not suggesting ignore it. What we are suggesting is that when it comes to the application, give folks a chance to get through the door. Give them a chance to get in there so that they can make their case." At the beginning of 2018, California law brought into effect the Fair Chance Act, also referred to as the Ban the Box law, which aims to reduce barriers of employment for formerly incarcerated individuals. This law generally prohibits employers with 5 or more employees from asking a job candidate about conviction before making a conditional job offer. Systemic issues such as this one will require certain policy changes that towards the beginning of the process will be expensive at first. Just as taxpayers were involved in the implementation of these policy failures, we must also be involved in trying to build a better prison system. Mass incarceration was created through decades-long policy shifts at the national, state, and local level. Ending it will require policies just as extensive. In the long run, I believe this will end up benefiting the government by having more successful reintegrated citizens to contribute to the economy. Higher opportunities for employment and a chance to rebuild our lives gives ex-convicts incentive to deviate from falling back into crime patterns. And I'd like to talk about the parties involved and who benefits. Politicians or government officials always benefit by winning the favor of the public as they accommodate to creating a safer community, although communities of color always end up losing. Mass incarceration takes away family members. For many people, this causes effects to our youth as well, which should be contributing members of our communities and should be our future. The punishment for these individuals continues as they face various challenges to reintegrate back into society and catch up from the years that they lost while in prison. This type of research is important because although mass incarceration is a big issue that has various effects on society, I personally never thought to think about the challenges that ex-convicts face when they're truly trying to change their lives and become better. We as a society have not given them proper opportunities and support to reintegrate successfully, and this is demonstrated in the rates of recidivism. During my research, I came up with a few research questions of my own, which are the following. Which employers hire former felons? and/or people charged with misdemeanors? What other kinds of opportunities could benefit ex-convicts for a successful reentry? What are the demographics of the recidivism population? And how many employers in California follow the Fair Chance Act? I would like to share my findings with others around me and bring awareness to the effects that mass incarceration has on ex-convicts even after they are released. By educating myself and others is moving one step forward in trying to find a solution, or aid in the fight to bring more opportunities for ex-offenders throughout the United States. Everyone deserves another chance to become better and work on themselves. If we as a society fail to help these individuals, then we will have to continue to lock up people and build more prisons, which only worsens this issue. Before finding ways to build a better and fairer system to fix our prison system, we should be aware of the brief history of incarceration and how it affects others who have been formerly incarcerated. And that is the end of my presentation. These are my references, and I'm open to questions.
All right, well, first, let's recognize you, Julia, for your presentation. Good job on that. A lot of valuable information. So thank you for sharing that. So opening it up to our Zoom room, are there any questions or comments in response to Julia's presentation?
I had a question. I don't know if you researched it or not. Is there a difference of how unfair it is for men and women who come out into reentry? Like, is it harder for women than men or men than women?
It is a little bit harder for women, and it usually affects them a bit more when they are incarcerated. If they have children, they have to struggle for getting child custody. But there are like reentry programs that they can apply to in the prisons that helps them, because it is harder for women to reenter after they've been incarcerated.
Thank you.
Ban the Box is a national campaign movement. There are a few states that have signed the Fair Chance Act, which also is the same thing as Ban the Box, and California is one of those states, and it signed it in January of 2018. I was just answering the question in the chat, sorry.
Is there a question in the chat? Okay, I have a question. And this is probably for you to respond to your research questions, but if you could share some of the demographics of our reentry population, like what does the reentry population look like? What are some of the challenges that they encounter?
I feel like some of the challenges would be that when they are released, they go back into the communities that they originally came from, and usually they're communities that are from lower economic backgrounds. So if there's already limited opportunities there, it's kind of a competition. So I feel like if they don't have opportunities there and they weren't prepared while they were in prison, then they're going to fall back into their crime patterns. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
It did, at least the first part, and then you can just maybe speak to what does the reentry population look like some of their, not just the challenges, but like when we're talking about reentry, who are these people? Who are they in the community?
Mostly minority groups. I can't give exact percentages because I did not research that, which is why I did have that as a research question. I would like to further research that and look more into that.
Any other questions from our audience for Julia?
I think it was a great presentation. Thank you for sharing.
One more question, or I should say another question and another one. Why did you choose this topic?
I chose this topic because it just, I first searched like mass incarceration, and there were different, I didn't think that effects, I thought it was only like a prison problem, and I didn't think of the other effects that it affected, like our economy and society. And I have personally some family members that have been in prison and come back out, but they make up part of that recidivism rate because one of them is in there right now. But I guess I just want to look and see, like, why is it so hard for him to get his life together, and also to just open up my mind. I never really thought to think about how hard it is to really try to get back into society.
Thank you for that. Is there any information that you're going to take from your research in this assignment or presentation to share with your people that may be experiencing some of these challenges?
For me, yes, I definitely will be able to help my family members a bit more and share with them. I've practiced a little bit in front of them, so they kind of know all of these things also, which interests them as well. So I'm glad that I'm kind of spreading a little awareness to all these people here and also some family members. But I hope to just, like, for us to be aware that can possibly help make a difference a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you for your questions. Are there any other questions for Julia or for Bernice as well?
Someone asked that they have heard that corporations benefit from prison labor. I have heard of this, but I can't give a great answer because I haven't personally researched all of this. I know that there are reentry programs that if they let these formerly incarcerated ex-convicts, like if they get a job, they kind of, it's incentive for these corporations because they kind of benefit. I can't give you more information, but I have read just a little bit, not much.
All right, if there are no other questions, I'll just demand, request, and enforce. No, I'm just playing, but I definitely would like for everyone to give them a round of applause. I'm very proud of these young ladies. They did a great job, both of them. Thank you. Thank you, Bernice. Thank you, Julia. Very informative, and speaking to populations that are in the system is very, very noble. Thank you all.
Good morning. My name is Aleem Cato. My topic for today is racial violence in Black communities by law enforcement. I'm going to go ahead and start. So what is racial violence? Racial violence is the behavior which serves as an intention to harm, damage, and execute a group of people. From the introduction of slave patrols to the issues of police brutality and the development of social justice movements, law enforcement has always had a long and deeply rooted history of racism and racial violence. Racial violence at the hands of law enforcement is an ongoing issue in many communities, but more so today we're speaking on the Black community. There's a continuous outpour of racial violence that has been tremendously exemplified by law enforcement. The presence of systemic racism has been a driving force in the glorification and justification of racial violence. This has commonly been depicted through the deaths of individuals such as Breonna Taylor, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, George Floyd, Mike Brown, and Tatiana Jefferson, and also through the wrongful arrest of countless Black people to date. Needless to say, racial violence by law enforcement strips the voices of Black people and makes the overall experiences in this country traumatic. So what are the impacts? Black people in America overwhelmingly make up the majority of individuals who are experiencing firsthand the impact of racial violence brought on by law enforcement. Racial violence towards Black people can be seen in a multitude of ways, from traffic stops, stop and frisk, racial profiling, police brutality, and police killings. Traffic stop and frisk are amongst the most identified ways in which law enforcement has inflicted pain, chaos, and turmoil that has been amplified throughout the Black community. The widespread police violence has definitely aided in the growing acts of anti-Black violence in and on our communities. Here are some stats. Statistics show that racial violence by law enforcement is disproportionately used against people of color. When it comes to traffic stops, Black adults are 5 times more likely than whites to be stopped unfairly by police officers. 2/3 of Black adults, approximately 65%, acknowledge that they've been in situations where they were deemed suspicious based on their race. As of May 2020, a study by Lancet of the 95 traffic stops by 56 agencies between 2011 and 2018 found that Black people were pulled over more than whites. The study also showed that Black people are more than likely to be searched at a stop than their white counterparts. According to the U.S. National Vital Statistics System open source database, over a 40-year study period of time between 1980 and 2019, Black Americans was estimated to be 3.5 times more likely to die from police violence than their white counterparts. 1 in 1,000 Black men have a chance of dying at the hands of police, while Black women were 1.4 times more likely to be killed than white women. What can be done? Properly finding the means of racism in law enforcement will take a lot of tedious work. Reducing racial violence at the hands of law enforcement will require some purposeful strides that can lead to ongoing transformational change, especially in regards to precisely recognizing the many forms in which racial violence is being utilized by law enforcement. This is and will continue to be a problem because of how deeply embedded racism is in law enforcement, and also how we are not accurately addressing it productively. The racial misconduct of law enforcement has constantly been swept under the rug and ignored. Rarely do we ever see police officers being held accountable for their actions. What has been taking place is no longer a will to protect and serve. It has now turned into a conviction to profile and kill. Stemming from the recent protests, the longer to defund the police has gradually become the staple for change. This is not primarily a call to remove overall funding. It is mainly a call for police reform. Strategically, dismantling the systems and institutions in place will be important towards the betterment of the Black community. In order to effectively address this issue, there needs to be an open discussion and questions to start this process. It is important to understand how Black people are treated under the law. We must advocate for the decriminalization of Blackness, the Black experience, and the Black community, and focus on deconstructing the racial bias ingrained in our justice system. And some of the research questions I came up with were in what ways can law enforcement work towards changing the narrative in regards to community policing? How can law enforcement take into consideration their own bias and prejudice when it comes to encountering Black people? How long will it take for Black people to receive justice for the effects that police violence has in their communities? How can the extent of police brutality be measured? What should or could be done about police violence? And lastly, what do we need to stop? What do we need to do to stop police from killing Black people and others with impunity?
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any questions or comments for this presentation? Oh, yeah, please, yeah.
Ahliyah, thank you. I appreciate your presentation, and I wondered if there are any communities in the Bay Area, just to keep it local, that are making some positive change about this.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of your question.
Oh, I was just asking if some police departments sort of touted themselves as reforming racism within their ranks, for instance, Richmond, but then Richmond had some terrible things that they, you know what I'm saying? Like they were kind of advertising, their police chief was very vocal, and then some terrible things happened. I just wondered if you've seen any movement in local police forces for anti-racist practices and training for their recruits or their existing officers.
Personally, no. I live in Richmond, but I'm from San Francisco, and I work in Oakland. So me being experienced in all 3 departments in my lifetime, I do not see any change. I do like how they try to present some type of reform, but the actions of the police officers still to this day does not showcase that reform or that change, especially within the Black communities or communities of color in general. Me working in Oakland, I work with Black youth, and this, their how police officers encounter these kids does not display any type of reform. The community policing that is showcased is very hostile and aggressive. That doesn't react well to the Black communities, especially in regards to the history that police officers have with Black communities. And I always go back to get people to understand the historical context of police, how they started off as slave patrol. So a lot of that same mindset and what they were taught then has not changed over the course of these years, these decades. So I feel like we have to dig deeper than just trying to defund the police or build some type of reform. Because all day long you can put money towards the reforming, but until you change the actual context of what police officers were and what they are today, you won't see any type of change. And that's really how I feel about it.
Thank you. I have to say, I agree. It's deep. It's really deep in the culture of police officers and police training, I think. And the militaristic, anyway, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just present one more time. Does anyone have any questions about criminal reform or any of the presentation topics that Ahliyah went over? You can go ahead and raise your hand or just unmute yourselves or put it in the chat.
I'll ask the librarian question, which is, particularly which sources did you find particularly valuable in the process of doing your work here?
In regards to articles or things I've read.
Mm-hmm.
What is the name again? The national. I have it right here. The study that I brought up in regards to the stats. The National Vital Statistics System,
okay,
which is the open database I found. It had a 54-page study of stats dating back the whole 40-year time span from 1980 to 2019 in regards to police killings, arrests, police brutality, how it affects Black communities. I think that was the most impactful piece. So I took a lot from that piece alone. Because it highlighted so much, and it showed like different. It had videos and things like that. So I think that was the piece that I enjoyed most.
Okay, very good. I would encourage you to put the link into the chat.
No problem.
Just to so that other folks can follow up on that.
Oh, that would be great. I was thinking of another question too, Ahliyah. I was wondering what you thought about the conviction of George Floyd's killer just a few months ago. Do you think that will make any change in the system? Or do you think that was helpful, not really helpful? What do you think about that?
Nice. It's good. It's crazy you asked this. I just spoke on this. I speak on this all the time because I'm gonna start off by saying this. I'm very pro-Black, but that does not mean I'm anti anything else. I like to put that out there because people has a very negative connotation when a Black person says they're pro-Black. Means that they poke at it like they're racist, or they're trying to say how any other person's or any group's experience is not the same as theirs. Is not what I'm saying. I'm very pro-Black, which means I'm very heightened and in tune with the experience because I am a Black woman. I experience these things on a daily basis. So with that, I do not agree with the sentencing. I do not with the case in general. How the trial went, it was like, it's hard to describe this because as a Black person, I'm so emotionally in tune. Because this is things that we've experienced for years. Like, I've been present for protests. I've been present for this. And it's like, we get the trial and, we're expected to be happy with the years given. It was okay, he's going to get this. Does that make you guys happy now? That's what I take from these type of cases. When in actuality, we still have the deaths of Mike Brown who needs convictions. We need Trayvon who needs convictions. We need a Tatiana Jefferson. We need Sandra Bland. We need Breonna Taylor. We need Ahmaud Arbery. And look at even presently looking at Ahmaud Arbery's case and the Kyle Rittenhouse case. We can bring up all of these cases and how they're letting this young white man choose his own jurors for his trial. When in fact, these other individuals who are deceased, they have no one speaking on them in regards to choosing the people for their trial. And it's amazing how, even stepping back to my topic, racial disparities is shown everywhere. Racial bias is shown everywhere. You can't tell me how any Black person ever faced any type of conviction was able to choose their jurors. It's like I'm flabbergasted because I was just watching this case before hopping on. I really don't agree with the time given. It's like a slap in the face. Because Black people was getting murdered for 400 years without any legal justice. So it continues to happen and it's ongoing. And it's so much I can speak on. I'm trying to in a way sugarcoat my feelings without offending anyone. But personally, with the George Floyd case, that was just like, okay, we got you guys this case. Let that be that. And on top of that, he wants to override his conviction. He has 22 years. With good behavior, he'll only be able to serve 10. So we're not getting justice. We're getting a slap on the wrist. That's not justice at all. Because with good behavior for a white male, you can serve half your time and get out freely to live your life all over again. So I don't. Yeah. And in regards to that being a highlight to reform, that's not it. Because that's still showing people of color that, I can kill you guys and get away with it. It's not the first time it's happened. This won't be the last. So.
Yeah, it's really draining trying to do this work sometimes. Do you have any way that you can is there anything that you get energy from when you do this kind of work so you don't get burnt out?
Energy, really no. This is the work I plan on going into in the future. Being that I work with Black and brown youth and inspiring these kids to go into criminal justice and learn more about it. I don't think I'll ever get a break from it because I want to see some valuable change. I don't want just, this is for you, take it in the moment type change or accept this for what it is type change. I need there to be an ongoing transformation within this justice system. And we have to realize a lot of people in our justice system were born in the 20s and 30s. So their mindset is not to change or to be for people of color when in fact, go back in those dates, we weren't even thought of. People of color, Asian, Latino, Indigenous, African American, we were not even a part of anything. A lot of this in place were in thought of white men, not in white women either. Like, let's be honest. These are white men. All of this is entitled to them. So until we can uproot that and dismantle that, then we'll have something going forward. But no.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Unless there are any other questions, comments.
I just want to thank you, Ahliyah. I work with students too, and in sort of academic remediation world, right? But I think that, uplifting brown and Black children and keeping them feeling supported is so essential. And the big hope. So I'm taking some hope that you're in the community doing work. I think is essential. I can't tell you. And I want you to go to law school. Okay.
That is the goal.
From within. Yes, please do.
All right, everyone, let's give her another round of applause.
Well, my name is Kenny, and I did a project of the book Tell Me Who You Are in my FYE class. Of course, I'm an African American, and I thought I knew about racism until this book, both external and internal. A lot of these stories from personal experiences from other people showed me how racism is more than just, simple hate speech and stereotypes, and more of and understanding racism is more than just, understanding the data and analytics side of it, or just, personal experiences, but how it's a collective relationship between the two. Um, One of the quotes I picked was both private and public schools in the United States, we don't remember ever having a honest conversation about race. And I picked this quote because I related to it. A lot of the time, racism for me, in all my school's experiences, it was always taught as something that happened so far in the past that it doesn't affect us now, or something that, I shouldn't worry about, or something that, it's just good to know. But rather how, and then just different cultural aspects about it, how different cultures are affected by different stereotypes. Those things weren't talked about. It was always just, something, one big event from the past, and they taught it as if it happened so far back there. One experience I personally related to this story was Ronnie B. He was his father was racially profiled, and so his father wasn't in his life, and he always in the story he felt as if he was worried that he was going to get racially profiled, and he won't be in his daughter's life. And I relate to this because I personally have been racially profiled. It was in the past, someone had done a crime, and they were searching around, and evidently I was very hardly persecuted, but turns out the person who they were looking for were white. I didn't fit the description, and because of that, ever since then it's been hard to feel comfortable. I've gotten used to it now, but for a while it was hard to feel comfortable going into certain neighborhoods and leaving my comfort zone. It felt hard. um, Another quote I picked was African Americans are incarcerated at a rate 5 times more than the rate of white Americans. And racism is bigger than you think. Like I said earlier, it's more than just hate speech and violence, and it's an avoided topic. I learned that racism can be there can be an internalized racism. How back in the day, there was a Willie Lynch syndrome, as it's called now. And that's because back in the day, someone named Willie Lynch was credited and very highly praised in the South because of his book about how to make a slave. And it's a very disturbing, heart-wrenching book. Willie Lynch, he compared African Americans to horses and cattle, and how you would train horses and cattle. That's the same way he wanted to treat us humans. And how there's certain things, there's more detail about it in the letter, of course, but just a brief overview of how he talked about breaking the will of a woman to where she didn't feel any attachments to her children when they came up, as well as making them more independent and less dependent on anyone else, and then breaking the will of a man to make him simply just an able body, making him feel like he doesn't need to be smart, doesn't need to think for himself, and making him very dependent on somebody who can tell him what to do rather than think for himself. And we are all different, and beautiful in our own ways. White is the color of milk, fresh snow produced. It's a combination of all the colors in the visible spectrum. Black is the color of ebony in outer space. It has been symbolic with color and elegance, solemnity and authority. These are just two, different things that I thought, were good because in recent years, these definitions in the dictionary have changed. And if you went back in the day, I believe Malcolm X, he wrote about it, but how when you look in the dictionary, back in the day, white was always something that was pure, holy, better than just today. Other races are compared and contrast relative to it. That you weren't considered white in America, and how you were treated just as bad as African Americans, people of color, and Asian Americans. And a lot of the time, Irish Americans, they were hunted by the KKK. They were placed in very very poor areas, very poor housing, healthcare, all that type of stuff. And it wasn't until that a lot of those races, nationalities treated African Americans and other people of color like American Caucasians do. It wasn't until then to where they just been able to get rights. And then, of course, to this day, Irish are connected to Caucasian stereotypes. And I made this funnel just personally as how I see discovering racism and how to fight it. And I think the funnel goes from the most biggest thing to the most surface area thing that you first need to do, and then going down to the smaller is something that's more active. So first things I said, awareness, and it's you can't try to understand or fight against racism if you don't even understand that it's real, or try to understand that it's real. And then consider what you do or don't know, or what you know and you don't. And I think that a lot of people, kind of like myself, had a very just broad knowledge of racism, and not so much as what different fine needlework of what racism can be and how it can show itself. And then the intention, why do you need to know this? A lot of people want to get close to people for malicious reasons, as well as some people just want a pat on the back, some people want attention. But then there's a genuine reason of just wanting to be close with people and wanting there to be a oneness amongst people in your community. And then the purchase, a lot of times, how are you going to find out? A lot of times purchasing can not only just be with money, but it can be with your time, it can be with effort, stuff like that. And then loyalty, what will you do after this knowledge that you find out? How will you help different communities? How will you aid different people who are affected by certain things? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenny, for a wonderful presentation. You touch upon racism in so many different layers. So I'm going to open up this great time for a Q&A. So wonder whether anyone have any question or would like to learn more about Kenny's presentation. Please, you can raise your hand and we will call your name. Yeah. Yeah, Joanne and Barbara, please.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm on the Board of Trustees. I just really appreciated your presentation, Kenny. Unfortunately, I missed the section when you were talking about how the Irish were treated for obvious reasons. And I share with you, I've learned in this past year so much about racism. I thought I was educated, not so much. So really grateful for all your insight. But I don't know if you want to repeat that or if there's any I have the book, if there's a section in the book that talks about that. Thank you.
I don't believe there's a section in the book that specifically talks about the Irish and other nationalities with fairer skin, Italian, German, Russian, and so on and so forth. I don't believe that there is a section in the book that talks about it specifically. That's just information I looked up and wanted to find out myself from just different, wanting to know more about racism. And just other people I talked to, how, of course, Asian Americans, they aren't treated the best, especially now during this pandemic, as well as if you go to certain Italian as well as German households, how they were also viewed as someone who is lower than white people who were born in this country. If you weren't born in this country, you were viewed as lesser than, or just not white as a whole. And how it wasn't until people started treating other people of color, that's when they started to give other people rights. Because of their fairer skin, they just decided, all right, I'm taking away your culture and everything. Now you're just white as an American. You're no longer Italian. You're no longer German, Russian.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You've done a lot of research and really, really, really appreciate the clarity and organization of your presentation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tina, and I'm going to be doing a presentation and showing you my podcast on the book, Tell Me Who You Are. And then, so a little bit about the podcast. I created a podcast discussing quotes from our FYE book, Tell Me Who You Are. I connected quotes from the book to real life events, such as the Gabby Petito case, being Catholic, and supporting the LGBTQ plus community. And then I'm going to be starting my podcast. Hi guys, my name is Tina and welcome to my podcast. Today we're going to be talking about racism and about mistreating others, a part of communities and religious aspects, as well as race. And then we're also going to be talking about the book, Tell Me Who You Are. So from this book, I picked 3 quotes that I relate to, and I believe it may relate to you somehow. So the first quote I picked was, "The point of this chapter is to not provide you with a list of the right and wrong words, but to simply bring your consciousness into your words. The words we use matter. Words can show malice and ignorance. Words can make manifest dangerous ideologies and actions. Words, your words, hold tremendous power." So I picked this quote because I believe that words can hurt. And there's a saying where it's actions speak louder than words. And I believe that it ties together. So when you do use your words to hurt somebody, it sticks with them longer. And I believe words can tie to your actions. So for example, this recent week on Jackfruit. Jackfruit is a Asian news source about Asian hate and about news all over the world. They are on Instagram and it's spelled JACKFROOT, Jackfruit. And they also have another page called Jackfruit News. But on Jackfruit, they posted a post about a restaurant in San Jose, and it's called Pocha K. 6 kids who are my age and who I went to school with decided to dine and dash, and as they were running out, the owner ran behind their car, and unfortunately, he was dragged about 20 feet. He was very hurt, and but he's okay, and I'm very glad that he's okay. But when Jackfruit posted this, it got a lot of attention. It got over 10,000 likes, and I just feel like they could have just used their words to explain to the owner why they ran. And it isn't because they didn't have money, but they did it as a joke. And I feel like once they were exposed, they decided to post on Instagram that they were sorry. And I feel like their words don't connect with their actions because their actions are so much different than their words. And then moving on, the next quote I picked was, "What bothers me is that the classic image of the white savior, like a white girl taking a volunteer trip during summer and helps those hungry Black kids without ever realizing her ancestors made those kids hungry and rampaged that country and sold their ancestors into slavery." So I picked this quote because recently on social media, there was this girl who went missing with her fiance, and supposedly her fiance killed her and buried her body in the woods. She is a white woman, and I believe her story was so spread across the country is because she was white. And during the search of her body, they had found 9 other bodies. One of them include a Black woman, and then another include a Black man, and kids, and so many other stories that were buried, and so many other people who went missing that no one cared to post about, no one cared to spread their story across the country. And then the last quote I picked was, "I am going there for the Eucharist and for owning my faith. I tell all LGBT people who are Catholic or Christian that leaving the church isn't going to help the church change. If they have to see you regularly, they'll have to see that they're making a mistake, and eventually they'll fix it. The church, the world moves very slowly, but it's moving." So I picked this quote because the LGBT community is a very touchy subject when it comes to being Catholic. I was raised Catholic and I went to catechism for all 18 years of my life, ever since I was born to currently. And I remember being in 3rd or 4th grade when my teacher had brought up the subject about being a part of the LGBT community, and how if you were a part of that community or supported that community, that you would be punished and you would be sent to hell, because God did not create a man to be with a man and a woman to be with a woman. And for you to change if you wanted to be a man or a woman or identify as something else. And I thought this was very wrong because my family is a part of the LGBT community and I heartedly support them. And I feel like it is just wrong to leave and exclude people from the LGBT community from the church. And my church has recently changed. They are becoming more openly to the LGBT community, but yet they aren't doing marriages for them still. During Mass, the priest will say, "We accept everybody and we love everybody." But when a couple who is together the same gender goes in and asks for a marriage certificate from the church, they will be denied due to the Pope's laws. And I just think that's very wrong, and I completely do not agree with them. But yeah, thank you for listening to my podcast. I'm so sorry for all of the mispronunciations. Thank you. And if you guys have any questions, please ask. And if you guys want to know more about news sources around the world, some of them are going to be found on Instagram, such as Jackfruit News, Jackfruit, or Next Shark, which is spelled NEXTSHARK, Next Shark. And they post mainly about news going around in the world, Asian news, about protests, about supporting local businesses. Thank you guys.
Okay, that was my podcast. Do you guys have any questions? Thank you so much, Dina, for a great presentation. I especially love the quote you share with us today. It feels hopeful to see that the world is changing and learning and adapting to be more inclusive. And I also, I just love the quote you share with everyone. A lot of the time, we should face the issue instead of walk away and try to avoid talking about it. So just simply by presenting or communicating your ideas and your belief is already making a great change. So no matter how small each our voice are, but however, when we all start communicating our ideas and belief, we become a greater power together. So thank you so much for your presentation. And sorry, everyone, I took the chance to, I should have asked everyone, do you have any question or comment for Tina's presentation? So true. So MGM posed a comment in the chat, a closed mind is a wonderful thing to lose. That's very true.
Oh, I see Melody Parker. Professor Parker is also in our room. I thought she was in session. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. Any last remarks or anything for Tina or Kenny, our presenters for this session?
We finished early in the other room. That's why I came to this room.
Welcome, Professor Parker. And we have a comment in the chat. I'm going to read it out. So from Professor Lee, Robert Lee. Thank you, Tina, for sharing this. You raised the level of awareness and were brave in acknowledging the trauma of the past and the work we must continue to do. Very well said, Robert. And also Tina actually mentioned quite a few social media resources in her presentation. So Tina, if you could type it in the chat as a reminder for people if they would like to learn more. For example, the jackfruit and the Max Shark. Yeah. So if you could, I know that you have that in your presentation slide, but oh yes, thank you, Tina. Yeah. So those are some great social media kind of try to raise cultural awareness and diversity awareness. So definitely look it up. And let's see. If nothing else, or maybe Professor Parker can share with us how's the other session doing?
Sorry, I'm on 2 devices and it's confusing. It was good. It was about criminal justice reform. So it was good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just had 1 presentation in that one. This one had 2.
So for those who are in this session and cannot make it to the other 2 sessions, don't worry about it because all our sessions are recorded. And
you have to come. Don't listen.
Please come. Don't listen.
Priority.
Yes. Yeah. And okay, I think we have 3 minutes left. Let's see.
Tina or Kenny, do you have any questions for us?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any questions, but I just hope everyone is able to go onto Instagram and look at Jackfruit and Neck Sharp. Like they really promote a lot of stories that you don't really hear. Especially like a lot of Asian attacks, and then a lot of like local businesses that aren't able to support themselves. Like they post all around the world and all around the Bay Area, and it's very informational.
And so you said Jackfruit and Neck Sharp, but how do we get there? Like on Twitter? Like what if we don't do that much social media?
It's gonna be on Instagram. I'm not sure if they are on Facebook or Twitter yet. But I just know as of right now, they're very big on Instagram. And if you don't have Instagram, I believe if you just type it into your laptop, the search engine, Instagram, Jackfruit, you can view like their posts through like your web page without having Instagram.
Okay, very nice. Okay. We are being told to go back to the other room. Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Hi, my name is Madison, and today I'm going to be talking about how pesticide use contributes to racism through migrant fieldwork. To get started, let's discuss exactly what pesticides are. So as defined by the EPA, pesticides are considered any substance or mixture of substances that are intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating any pests. Pesticides are used in agricultural contexts to control weeds, insect infestation, and anything else that could pretty much inhibit the sale of crops. Though pesticides are used in crop fields all over the U.S., about 20% of pesticides are actually used in California alone. States like Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, and Florida also use a large amount of pesticides and insecticides. over 200,000 pounds of liquid pesticides are used in California yearly, according to the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. The states that I mentioned previously, such as California, Texas, and Florida, to name a few, contain a large portion of the United States migrant demographic, considering the surrounding borders. If you see here, the picture of the map shows migratory patterns. The filled circles on the map represent the most common residents after the central point of access. The lines represent the patterns in which migrants travel for work in other states as well. Farm work such as picking fruit is predominantly done by Mexicans, Black Puerto Ricans, along with Chinese and Japanese migrants. The leading demographic of migrant workers is actually older Mexican fathers. 68% of all farm workers are actually born in central Mexico. For example, in California, we experience communities where a lot of Mexican migrants reside. While maybe in Florida, it might be a lot more common to see Black migrants or Puerto Rican migrants. The demographic of said areas are important to note because pesticide use can cause a lot of adverse health effects. Contact with soil is actually a pretty minor way that workers can be exposed to chemicals in pesticides and insecticides. Pesticides can be distributed in a few main strategies: by tractor sprayers, by handheld gallon packs, or by planes and helicopters, which are called agricultural aircrafts. Most migrant workers wear bright neon orange vests, backpacks, and hats so that they can be seen and alert the farmer not to spray. Yet there have been instances where farmers purposely sprayed over migrant workers from the small helicopters shown to the right. On July 23, 2019, a crop helicopter sprayed over a cornfield in Illinois, which affected 27 migrant farm workers. If we refer back to the map, it shows the direction upward of relocation from Texas. According to the lawsuit filed in December 2020, the Mexican farm workers from Texas actually traveled to Illinois for seasonal work in cornfields. From the spraying incident of the helicopters, the Mexican workers actually suffered acute poisoning. As stated in the lawsuit, they experienced shortness of breath, blurred vision, painful skin irritation, vomiting, headaches, excessive fatigue, and dizziness. 5 children were also exposed to the pesticides because they came in close contact with the farm workers, which just so happened to be their parents. It stated that the helicopter was so low that they could even read the aircraft tail number. As stated in the lawsuit, the workers ran out of the field, but 15 minutes later, the farm owners actually ordered the workers to re-enter the field to continue working. And the farmers once again sprayed the farm workers. This crime was committed by Pioneer Hybrid International Incorporation. In my opinion, it seems like this was done purposely and was racially motivated. This instance is actually really concerning, considering there was another incident in 2014 in a Tennessee blackberry farm by a small agricultural aircraft plane. There could be many more cases of this, but workers who may be undocumented might not want to come forward considering they're vulnerable to threat and fear job inconsistency. In the photo to the right, we can see how low these agricultural aircrafts actually fly in order to spray the pesticide onto the crops. And the helicopters can actually spray as low as 10 feet off the ground. This case really exemplifies that the fact that farm workers are really at a disadvantage because they are willing to work even in horrible conditions. There are so many levels of people that get to benefit from this exploitation of farm work, but I would probably say that it benefits the farmers the most because it goes to brands and corporations that turn the produce into product. Though we may not see it, us being consumers, we also benefit from the exploitation of migrant workers as well. We're able to get our produce at a lower rate because migrant workers get paid less. It's really disheartening because a lot of migrant workers work for less than minimum wage, and in return, they get no safety at their work environment. We can really see this in stores because we might notice that organic actually costs a lot more compared to non-organic because conventional farms usually don't use as much pesticide, if not any, compared to the farms that do use pesticides. It can be hard to tell which products have actually run through pesticide use because it widely varies. The most affected crop is strawberries, but even Cheerios and Quaker oatmeal have traces of glyphosate, which is a weed and bug killer that is linked to cause cancer and kidney failure. Now we know that not only are the brands benefiting from migrant work, but they're even benefiting from our own health as well. Some of the major companies that sell produce that have exposed migrant workers to pesticides are Walmart, Costco, Safeway, Kroger, and some other main grocers. Just as of June 2021, Walmart released this statement. To help improve pollinator health and biodiversity in the regions which we operate, Walmart US is announcing new pollinator common commitments. This was actually written by Martin Mundo, which is Walmart's senior vice president. On the company's corporate website, he stated that Walmart and Sam's Club will try not to sell third-party produce that's been treated chemically. But there's not an actual deadline to which this commitment will be put into effect. According to AgriPulse Corporation, the statement was actually made by Walmart because they were under very heavy review by the Environmental Protection Agency and the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. This was in regards to how they were using glyphosate around migrant farm workers. So now that we have some background about who benefits from this migrant exploitation, how much would it actually cost to deter usage? Well, in the United States, we spend about $15 billion annually as of 2018 for the use of over 400,000 tons of liquid pesticide. It can cost the U.S. only $250,000 to create a new alternative to pesticides like glyphosate, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. When trying to regulate pesticides in 2014, the U.S. roughly spent about $470 million through lawmaking, education resources, and advertising. These numbers are nothing, though, compared to 2018's $15 billion. It seems that it may just not be as important because it's affecting people of color. In regard to the pesticide crisis, we have to look broadly at the entire problem. We can't just stop at pesticide use because there's a large amount of it already in our soil and food. We also need to provide health care for those who have been affected by pesticides, as well as more education resources to inform more about the rest of farm work. The best way to really prevent this is by buying organic or even urging brands to use non-chemical pesticides and insecticides. After all, the company Pioneer dominates most of the markets it participates in, such as sunflower, soybean, wheat, and canola. It holds a 39.6% share of the North American seed corn market, and even higher shares in European markets, according to them. Some questions I would like to further research are, is there any methods that have actually made farmers stop using pesticides in the past? And to what degree can pesticides use affect people of color in regards to water and air as well? I know personally I can apply this information to my everyday life because I'd like to be more mindful of which politicians are in favor of the regulation of pesticides. I know personally I can apply this information to my everyday life because I'd like to be more mindful of which politicians are in favor of the regulation of pesticides. I can also look at who is accepting of a more diverse workforce for migrants. I can also choose other products at the grocery store rather than the ones that put Black, Latinx, and Asian lives at risk. Migrant workers not only deserve accessible work and wages, but they also are missing necessary components of a safe work environment. In conclusion, if we made migrant work more accessible and diverse, regardless of status, there would possibly be created a change in the way we handle pollution and public health, as well as it pertains to human rights. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madison. Let's go ahead and give Madison a round of applause for her presentation. Very informative, very informative. 2 pictures in the slide deck, and pictures speak 1,000 words, so thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to open the Zoom room up for any questions for Madison in response to the presentation or any information that was conveyed at this time.
Madison, I really enjoyed that presentation. Thank you. You got me
so much.
You got me thinking a lot, and I'm wondering about immigration reform, and if you feel that, like in your readings, there's been opposition to immigration reform because of these issues, because people are comfortable, people in power are comfortable with the way things are. Is that something you came across at all?
I did really come across that in the articles that I was reading in terms of migrant work, of course. I personally think that
because we consider migrants as illegal, or we kind of take into consideration their status, I think that's really a problem. And if there was a immigration reform or migrant reform, I believe that it would be really beneficial, considering work instances like this would be taken into consideration and possibly change.
Thank you. I hope we see that happen. That's for sure.
I have a question, Madison. You mentioned strawberries as one of the major crops that pesticides are sprayed on. Are there any other crops that you came across in your research that were heavily chemically sprayed with pesticides?
Yeah, so in my research, they have something called the Big 15, which are actually only about 15 crops that are not heavily sprayed. So something like avocados, because they have a round shell around them when growing. So things like watermelons, avocados usually aren't heavily pesticide treated, but the things that are things like strawberries. They don't have a harder shell. You don't cut in them to eat them. So things like grapes as well, apples, pears, types of fruits like that grow out of the ground that, like I said, don't have a shell usually.
Pretty good to know and important. I have another question for you, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I know that there was a basically a protest that took place several years ago, led by Cesar Chavez. And I don't know if there are going to, be given the circumstances with pesticides being sprayed, do you foresee that some of our migrant workers who are responsible for harvesting the crops, do you foresee that they may decide to protest in response to their treatment at work?
The more we become like accessible to migrant work, I do believe that there will. It's kind of just being hopeful in terms of that aspect. But I know personally how I spoke about Walmart. They actually were, like I said, under review by the EPA. And that is something that they actually did to kind of react that. The EPA was actually in favor of migrant work and migrant health, of course. So the glyphosate was actually a really big problem. So I do think that in protesting, I'm personally from San Joaquin Valley, and I know that it's a big issue over there. And I have seen protests in Stockton for this issue. Only about once, mostly it's about immigration. But in terms of farm work, it has come up. So I'm very hopeful that something will change in terms of this issue.
Thank you for that. All right, we have a couple more minutes in our Zoom room with this amazing presenter, Madison. Any other questions that anyone would like to pose to Madison? They're still consumed with the information that you presented. Yes. All right. Well, one last round of applause for Madison before we transition back to the session. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
So our project is on the COVID-19 pandemic in Oakland, California. I'm Brenda Maciel.
And I'm Melanie Guzman.
And I'm Cherish Smith.
Oh, okay. Next, you can tell me next slide.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so the most affected city in Oakland by COVID-19 was East Oakland, and the community was already having financial problems and struggling in the communities. And during the pandemic, the amount of cases in the Alameda County increased dramatically. Since March of this year, when the vaccination was not widely provided to the community, only about 16% of adults were fully vaccinated. The zip code 94619 had the highest amount of cases in Oakland as the pandemic spread. There were 58 cases with 2.3% of the population in the areas of Redwood Heights, Crestmont, and Skyline Boulevard. My area 94601 had about 56 cases in the Fruitvale and International area between 23rd and 55th Avenue. The rate of homeless
people getting affected had the highest chance of contracting the virus. International is one of the lowest income areas in Oakland, California, causing people to lose their homes and jobs because they had no source of income. Next slide.
Okay.
So environmental racism. Toxic living conditions have increased death rates for a while now. Shorter life expectancy has been linked to higher levels of air pollution, and it can worsen cardiac problems, causing hypertension and weaken the immune system. We can protect lives during the present pandemic and future outbreaks by anticipating the increasingly large environmental attacks that people of color experience. African Americans with annual salaries of $50,000 to $60,000 are now exposed to far higher amounts of industrial chemicals, air pollution, deadly heavy metals, and viruses than very disadvantaged white persons with annual incomes of $10,000. Both urban and rural communities are affected by the imbalance. Next slide.
Oakland's population by zip code. The rates increased and decreased over time. Overall, 94601 through 94621 had the most case rates. And this is a representation of the map by zip code. And over here, COVID-19 hits Oakland, Fruitville the hardest, which is what we were talking about in the beginning, because Fruitville is one of the most effective cities during COVID. Next. The Oakland community was big on events and community active services. One event that got shut down was First Fridays in downtown Oakland. My community lost homes, jobs, institutions, and most importantly, its people. Many people couldn't survive this massacre and exploited our community. They were terrified it would hit the homeless community harder than anyone, and it did. Evictions and rent increases have been extended throughout our local towns. Even before COVID-19, summers of wildfires, smoke, and citizens living in East and West Oakland had a hard time breathing the air. COVID-19 most affected the body, risking kids and adults who have asthma, more lung complications, and medical conditions. The community is starting to open back up and also allow free walk-up tests and vaccinations at local clinics or appointments through institutions such as Walgreens, CVS, etc. Lake Merritt Lodge also has an emergency site for COVID-19 cases that impacted housing and caused medical attention for those who aren't able to get provided care at hospitals. Next.
How to better our communities. Present, COVID-19 was in fact something that couldn't be prevented because before it was discovered, it had already dispersed. If the communities were informed for these outbreaks, many families and distributions could have been prepared mentally and physically on how to adjust. Even if citizens don't have or never gotten the virus, the impact had a huge effect on how people live their everyday lives. Homeless people stood no chance, inside and out. They had to suffer the most. Past, local places and the government could provide more local food drives. The best way it was to wear your mask, even if you're vaccinated, focusing on when to help benefit rather than negative outcomes like staying safe, healthy, sanitizing, and social distancing while complying to protect yourself and the community. And right here, I just put a picture of a mask and self-distancing as it is really important. Next slide, please. What was the cause and effects? Due to the pandemic, multiple resources and small businesses closures gradually affected people's life in Oakland, especially hardworking families who will be challenged to provide childcare and maintain work schedules. Here are some lists of specific services that were closed down due to COVID. Libraries, recreation centers, senior centers, Head Start and early Head Start programs, as well as facilities rentals. And as you can see, I just put some pictures of a lot of stores that were closed due to COVID. Next slide, please. What is Head Start / early Head Start, if you don't know what that is? For those who don't know what Head Start, early Head Start programs, it gives babies the ability to learn and interact with other babies. Babies get taught important early development skills, such as playing with shapes and learning how to write their names. Due to the pandemic, these programs were closed and thousands of pandemic babies didn't receive this great opportunity. This was a major effect of the pandemic that affected babies. It strongly encouraged that you look for childcare that stimulates and encourages your child's physical, intellectual, and social growth, according to the California Department of Education. Next slide, please. Now, what can we do in the future to curb environmental racism? We can start off by offering low-income communities the right resources to avoid a plunge in the community. Resources such as a CARES Act in advance for a future pandemic. Why wait until the COVID-19 pandemic to destroy our communities to release a CARES Act? That doesn't make sense, right? Giving the people of Oakland, especially low-income and homeless, the opportunity to be prepared for a pandemic can make a drastic change. Next slide, please.
Ways to help. A start to help cleaning up the damages of this can be by helping repair the homes that were ruined or simply build new homes for the people who went homeless from the pandemic. One organization that aims towards rebuilding homes and lives is called Rebuilding Together. Next. The cost of reburnishment. The total cost for reburnishment, this is estimated to be around—
Oh wait, sorry guys, this slide was supposed to get cut. It's like not factual.
Oh, okay.
So ignore that, I'm sorry about that.
This is the end one?
Yeah, this is our works cited page. Thank you guys for listening to our presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's give them a big hand. Excellent information. I think there's some really good information there. Unfortunately, we are running out of time for questions, and we need to go to the next one. I invite people that do have questions to stick around for our ending session. We have, and for the ending session, we'll have everybody able to ask questions in the big group. But yeah, so we have to go, unfortunately, to the next presentation.
Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation on air pollution in Oakland effects on underrepresented communities. My name is Faye.
I'm Regina. Sorry. Oakland is known as one of the top cities in the US, with many commercial and industrial facilities being so close to residential areas and public spaces. Air pollution from motor vehicles, refineries, and other sources has caused air pollution to increase in the city. The Port of Oakland, the Oakland Airport, and the I-880 have increased the levels of air pollution, which has caused to affect vulnerable areas like schools, hospitals, and senior centers. Air pollution from motor vehicles, refineries, and other sources has increased death rates associated with heart, lung, and stroke diseases in low-income and people of color.
So the first two pictures are some of the hazards causing the air pollution in Oakland. The first picture is obviously the traffic, the cars causing it and all that pollution. And the second one are the refineries in Oakland. And the last one is a map of the bad air quality for most of the cities in the Bay Area. If you look down, Oakland has like it's in the highest, which is like the unhealthy level compared to the other cities as well. Next slide, please.
Some words to know are PM, which is particulate matter or particle pollution, ozone, which is colorless, unstable, toxic gas with a pungent odor, and pollution, which means introduction of harmful materials into the environment. Next slide.
West Oakland and downtown Oakland is one of the most exposed community to pollution. They are also known as the high health burden. Residents have a higher rate of asthma attacks, strokes, and heart failure. And then the community has high poverty and high minority populations. And then bad health management due to living near busy roads and traffic pollution. And a lot of women, when they are pregnant or the fetus is developing in the womb, the baby is likely to have a lot of health problems when they grow up. Okay. And then the Port of Oakland is the busiest port, is the 5th busiest port in the United States. It is one of the biggest contributors to the pollution in West Oakland, so about 30%. The cool Port of Oakland uses diesel fuel refrigerators, but they are starting to switch over to electric ones, which can be turned on and off. The diesel fueled refrigerators were always running 24/7. And then the Port of Oakland received a $9 million grant to switch trucks from diesel to electric. And then the Oakland Unified School District breathes in 3 times the amount of diesel particles since they are near the Port of Oakland. And then the 2020 plan is to cut back the port's emission by 95%. And as of 2019, they were already down to 81%. In East Oakland, the I-880 is one of the biggest transportation route to the Port of Oakland and to Oakland Airport. It averages about 200,000 vehicles a day, so the 4th busiest freeway in California. It is vulnerable to elders and schools. In 2016, East Oakland experienced the highest asthma hospitalization compared to the rest of the Alameda County. There's higher death rates due to strokes, heart disease, and lung cancer compared to the Alameda and the rest of Oakland. And then the life expectancy of someone living in East Oakland is 7 years shorter.
So this is a map of the levels of air pollution in the West and downtown Oakland, as well as East Oakland. So toxic chemicals such as NO2, which means nitrogen dioxide, NO, which is nitric oxide, and BC, which is boron, combined, or they create in high levels of air pollution. These chemical toxins result to health problems that a lot of people face, especially people of color, such as heart, lung, and kidney diseases, as well as respiratory diseases as well. Next slide. So this is a map of the air pollution hazard in Oakland. So the docks, the freeways, such as I-880 and other industrial works are much more closer to Oakland than the other cities. And it's crazy how a lot of communities, especially underrepresented low-income communities, are so close to this hazard, making them very susceptible to the negative outcomes of being exposed to the hazards. Next slide.
Some information of where the United States or Oakland stands is 8th out of 228 national cities for worst ozone, 5th nationally for annual particle pollution out of 203 areas, and 3rd nationally for worst 24-hour PM 2.5 out of 217 areas. The racial impact is that Latinos, African Americans, Asians, and low-income people are breathing more air pollution than other demographic groups in the state. Households earning less than $20,000 a year and people who don't own cars suffer vehicle pollution levels about 20% higher than the state average. Asians breathing about 20% of that pollution. African Americans and Latinos breathing about 40% more particulate matter from cars, trucks, and buses than white Californians, and most likely to have lung, heart, and lung problems, asthma, lung cancer, and premature death.
Owning Our Air is a joint project between the Bay Area Air Quality District and the West Oakland Environmental Indicators. So their goal is to make West Oakland and Oakland overall more healthier. They want to reduce air pollution by requiring cleaner engines, using electricity instead of diesel. So they're doing this by using the 1118 rule and managing residentials. They have over 90 strategies to make West Oakland cleaner and healthier, partnering with many companies such as Google, CARB, or known as California Air Resource Board, and many more. So the Assembly Bill of 617 requires local air districts to focus on their pollution in overburdened communities. It was passed back in 2017, and the 1118 rule conducts health risk assessments for facilities whose emissions pose potentially high health risks. So the 1118 rule was actually given to the Port of Oakland to manage their pollution. And if you guys want to learn more about the Owning Our Air project, you guys could copy and paste this website, and it will pop up a PDF of the entire project and who's involved and how it's going to help Oakland. These are some alternative resources. So Owning Our Air, that is going to be another website, and other resources for any health or medical assistance, or if you are in need of a place to live, or a lot of Medi-Cal and food stamp programs.
So we created a Google form to just see how everyone can sort of relate to the air pollution in their communities. So we wanted to see what city everyone was in, and what type of air pollution is affected by that city, and how it relates to, and how that kind of contracts to underrepresented people as well. So I'll share the link of the form, and if you have like a free time to just look over it and type in your response.
Sounds great.
And yeah, so this is why we're excited. And thank you for listening to our presentation.
And then don't forget to show your both works cited pages. Thanks. I know you have a lot. Thank you. Okay, let's give them a huge round of applause. Oh, I see smiles. I see smiles. That's good. We just have a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any questions or comments for this group or the previous group? Oh, you have to say it fast because we're going to be going back to the other room in 60 seconds. Okay, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask in the main ending session. Thank you so much for our presenters. You did amazingly. I'll see you soon.
Hello, my name is Vance Lai, and I'll be talking about Cancer Alley. In Louisiana, along the Mississippi River, between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, there are communities that are slowly dying because of the toxic gases emitted by factories. These factories release toxic gases daily and are specifically located within low-income communities. The article Toxic Space and Time, Slow Violence, Necropolitics, and Petrochemical Pollution by Tom Davis states the density of high industry is startling. With a highly racialized geography, countrywide, 70.6% of the total minority population in St. James Parish live within 1 kilometer of a polluting facility. compared to 23.11% of whites living within the same distance. The locations of each facility are related to the community's race, education, income, and occupation. Even though that the community has shown concern for their health, government officials disregard them. The article, An Analysis of Population and Community Advocacy in Cancer Alley by Abigail Blodgett, also states, despite the residents' concerns, the government officials of St. James do not believe that environmental justice is a problem or a priority in their district because there has not been proof of any industry purposefully targeting a minority community to host their facility. The history. Looking back at history, white plantation owners owned large lands due to the time of slavery, which many were located along the river and flat lands. The article, Cradle of a Revolution, the Industrial Transformation of Louisiana's Lower Mississippi River by Barbara Allen states, after the Civil War, the Freedmen's Bureau made numerous small land grants to extended family groups of newly freed slaves, often on or near the plantation they had previously worked. But the large plantations remained in the hands of white planters. Petrochemical companies have been able to build their toxic facilities because they are able to benefit from the white plantation owners. The residents of St. James Parish have lived their entire lives there and are forced to breathe in the toxic gases. How is the community harmed? Families living next to a factory not only have to worry about their child's health at home, but also during school. There are two major Exxon Mobil pipeline systems and one Honeywell chemical facility, 2 miles from each other. They create a toxic triangle often or around the schools. The toxins emitted are dangerous for the children, especially since they are still growing up. In the article, Proximity to Industrial Toxins and Childhood Respiratory, Developmental, and Neurological Diseases, Christina Blodgett states, some mental disabilities, speech language impairments, and emotional disturbances, for example, reflect deficits in higher brain function, which could be caused by exposure to toxins. In sum, then, many of the students with disabilities attending schools in the parish may very well have neurological dysfunctions. This shows that particles released into the air can cause imbalances in the brain, causing it to process things differently. Blodgett also states high volume polluters, HVPs, of developmental toxins and neurotoxins found that these HVPs were often located near a large number of schools and children, and that these numbers were positively and significantly correlated with the measures of race and class. This shows that factories not only look at race, but the social class within an area. Looking at the average income of certain parts of St. James Parish, the ones with the highest average income does not have any factories in the district. Blodgett states the lowest average income in the parish hosts 10 of the 13 facilities. What can be done? There are solutions that can help defend the residents that live along the river, fighting for a healthier community. 1, advocacy groups. Advocacy groups are a strong way to show the issue to the world. Blodgett explains, the steps taken by grassroots organizations in St. James Parish that can most effectively be applied to environmental justice battles are to take the initiative to solve a problem, connect with larger groups that have the expertise, educate and vocalize, and obtain legal representation. Having a large group of support and help can show the world what is happening and demands change. 2, be involved. Being involved with the community will allow you to see what is happening in the community. Lastly, social media. Social media is the fastest way to share with others and connect with people. Having social media can be used to bring people together to talk about issues going on in the community. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mahmoud, and then I'm going to talk about my journey and its historical relevance. Next.
Next.
My topic is about previous stereotype of my experiences. My experience as a Black Muslim and its relationship with current events. How do my experiences differ from the stereotype reformed and targeted Muslim and refugees? Why do we assume immigrant African, refugee, and Muslim exercise are negative? What can we do to expand our view of these assumptions? Next. Relevant timeline of African American Muslim migration. America has a long, deep history of African people. The first African Muslim people to arrive to America was through slavery since the early 16th centuries. They were forced there as and removed of their Muslim beliefs and identified through most, if not all of them, came from West Africa, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Windham Coast, Gold Coast, Bigot of Beijing, Bigot of Bayfree. As you can see, sub-Saharan Muslims, African experiences and stories runs much deeper with the US than any race. The 19th and the 21st century relationship the Arab world has. I will explain the relevance of this letter. Current African migrant started in 1980s with Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan. Next. My Black Muslim experiences and current events. Sudan migration started in 1980s, early 90s. Restore a relationship with the United States made it as most of them had to come from these three surrounding countries like Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Egypt. This trend explains my migration through Egyptian here to the US. Next. President Donald Trump signed an executive order that restrict immigrants from 7 Muslim countries from coming to the country for 90 days. About 3 months, this suspended and entered to the US from any Syria refugees and prohibited any others seeking refugee from coming into the country for 120 days, about 4 months. During my migration, like many African Muslim and of the sub-Saharan, I did not experience many situations of tourism there, as do many Arab Muslims sadly face even during the Trump administration and restriction. on Sudan, I did not see myself or these around experiences anything. Ethnicity makes it easier on many non-Arab Muslim through their life, both from sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Notice up above the employees was on Arab migrants. Many Sudanese refugees view different routes have it easier because we look just like many other Black migrant and associate with traditional migrant traits. Next. Why do we assume African immigrant refugees and Muslim experiences are negative? What can we do to expand our view of the assumptions? I believe that many stories of immigrants, refugees, stream directly or indirectly to something negative, but that is only part of the entire truth and reality things. Many of us have overlooked advantages over there due to our ethnicity and even names. I believe this is why many of these stereotype of migrant experiences don't apply to me. Next. Thank you for listening.
And could you repeat your name again for me? I feel so terribly sorry. I wasn't able to pronounce your name right.
It's okay, no problem. Mahmoud.
Mahmoud.
Yeah, it's a kind of Mahmoud, yeah.
Mahmoud. Excuse my English is not my first language.
Yes,
so
me too.
so I'm learning how to pronounce everyone's name, but thank you.
No problem.
And so any question for Mahmoud or comments? We have a comment from NGM and some comment from Rebecca in the chat. We definitely learned a lot. Yeah, and thank you from Polly. So I'm going to read MGM's, MGM, you should just share your comment with us. Don't be shy.
I had started it before Muhammad started his presentation, so I didn't want to interrupt it. But I found it interesting to media that with the recent temperature increases, that they found lower income areas were dramatically hit with a higher temperature, sometimes a change of 10 degrees. And the reason being is that the housing projects that were built prior to all environmental laws and regulations that have made more current buildings or construction to be more environmentally conscious. So it was when I had the lead on the news that talked about the difference in environmental, it hit me that this is just like a subliminal or indirect way of how racism continues, even though it wasn't maybe intentional when the houses were built. But the reflection now in today's environment where the environment is so conscientious when we build new homes that we've left behind multitude of homes that are not protected against the heat waves.
Thank you, MGM. That's definitely very relevant to Cancer and Vincent's presentation. And let's see, anything else? that people would like to add or comment on? I know that, so actually, yeah, I have some reflection. How do I pronounce your name again? Mahmoud, no?
Mahmoud.
Mahmoud. Oh, thank you, Polly.
Sure.
Mahmoud. Okay, so Mahmoud, you actually brought us something very interesting. So a lot of time so all the Asian look similar. So I have that similar experience. So I'm from Taiwan, but people they can't distinguish you. You all look Asian. You have black hair, straight hair, and yeah. So actually there are a lot of subtle differences that a foreigner cannot tell. However, we are all very unique individual. But unfortunately, a lot of time people just look at your appearance. They don't know the subtle differences. They don't know, and they would discriminate you because they think you look that way. You are from there. Of course, I think the ultimate goal is that we are hoping we don't carry any type of subjective anything against other ethnicity. However, I just want to echo that because just like what Caucasian people, they all look similar to me. Whether you are from Polish, you are from Germany, or you are from US, they look similar to me because I wasn't born and raised in the States, so that's difficult for me to tell. But I guess that's probably good, that because we can tell, we shouldn't segregate. We should be like a whole community. So I think that's the ultimate goal. But I just want to echo you that because we should all be treated like human beings, because that's how we are. And I see a hand from Polly, please.
Yes, thank you, I Ching. I think that is something that was so clear in the book, Tell Me Who You Are, is that if we get to know each other and listen to each other's stories, we're less likely to make assumptions about people just from their outward appearance. And that the more we get to know each other as individuals, and this is why diversity is so important, and making friendships across cultures and races is so essential, is that once you start to get to know somebody, you do see them as a distinct individual and not part of a group. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you, Polly, for putting this beautifully. I didn't know how to pull things together. So, but thank you. You did a great summary of what I was trying to express.
I Ching, I thought you were very, very clear. The issue with Americans is we're so lazy. We don't want to take the time to really get to know someone. It's just easier to say, oh, A, B, and C is this, and D, E, and F is that. So now I'm done. I've coordinated everything. And it's that fast and dirty approach to life that gets us into trouble. And I think the other point that was made in both presentations is the awareness. We have to be aware that we all come with baggage. And to say, and Californians are notorious. We're liberal. We're an open door policy. We love everyone. And yet sometimes our racism is 10 times worse than it is in the South, because we perceive ourselves as being so open and trustworthy. And I don't see color. I don't care if somebody's polka dot. If you hear these statements, it's like, so what does that mean? And Californians are notorious for that. We wave our liberal flag, and yet our behaviors depict something else. So I thought your comment was excellent as far as how you perceive us and how we perceive different nationalities. or different backgrounds. So you did a good job.
We need to give the credits to Muhammad because
Absolutely.
and also Vincent, because their presentation helped us to start the conversation. Otherwise, we would have never get a chance to talk about it and to clear our mind. So thank you, the presenters, and thank you for the event. Thank you, MGM and Talia and Melody for organizing everything and giving us a chance to talk about it. Okay, I think we need to leave this room, and I'll see everyone in the main room.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to say before any finishing words, just round of applause to all of the presenters who are here today. I'm sure you did a phenomenal job, as I mentioned to some of you in the previous session. With the recordings that were done, we'll make a playlist for you on YouTube and piece them all together for those of us who weren't able to join one of the recordings. So look out for that. And with that said, I'll leave it off to whoever.
Me. Talia and I talked last night about how we were going to summarize or bring everybody back into the big room. And it's a welcome back. And I can tell, I jump from room to room. I like this presentation where you have the options of changing your rooms so that you can get as much diversity in the presentations as possible. If I can share the screen for just a second, I'd like to just bring up the names of the presenters and the presentations before I hand it off to Dr. Moore to lead us in a discussion on Q&As and reflections. Okay, so these are the presentations and the presenters that we were privileged to listen to today. And you can see that the topics have really wide variety of interest when you're talking about the environment and juvenile system and racism. And the discussions in the chat rooms were excellent. And I want to bring up something that I-Ching just mentioned in our presentation. The discussions had depth and breadth because of the presenters. If the presenters hadn't put the effort and the time into these presentations to make us think and stop and think about what we do and what we say, the chats and the discussions wouldn't have happened. So I can't say that I'm prouder to be part of an organization and of our students and the faculty members who led these students into these topics and made them understandable for everyone. It was just phenomenal. And a special thanks to both Dr. Moore and to Professor Parker, the amount of effort and energy, and to I-Ching and Kevin for what you've done to make this as seamless as possible. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my favorite criminal justice program director, Dr. Moore.
And probably your only criminal justice program director as we speak. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming out. We just wanted to give a space or give an opportunity for anyone to share a comment. If there was a presentation, a bit of information that stood out, or if you just wanted to maybe recognize one of or many of our student presenters. We just wanted to give you that space before we leave up out of here. Are there any comments that anyone would like to share about today's symposium?
First, I'm really glad you did it. And the student presenters were just really exceptional. They were comprehensive. They had all the citations. So maybe they could tutor me in doing my APA for my own graduate stuff. And the graphics, complemented the speeches that they had, and everything was just well paced and such a broad variety of topics, all of which we all need to pay attention to. But there's probably nothing better than having a symposium where you wish you could have gone to everything.
Thank you for that. That was nice to hear. All right. Any other comments or responses to the presentation? That must be the sound of information overload. All right. Well, as we prepare to leave, more informed, more empowered, more charged to make a difference, I do hope that we all take the information presented from our knowledgeable student presenters and really put this into action. H&U stands united against hate. You can see that behind many of us here. And it's not just a slogan, even though it's catchy, but it's actually our true intentions. And so imparting or in departing into our next time together, really hope that we embody the statement, really support the efforts that were displayed by our students, and again, move forward with this positive charge in addressing and responding to racism and making ourselves, our lives, and the future a better place and space for those to come.
I'll say, sorry to interrupt there. One thing I just thought about this right now for all the student presenters, I highly encourage anyone to add this to some part of your resume or portfolio. So as you move forward, do share that, because this is very important as we move along through our academic journeys. Feel free to share it wherever you have your social media, and let it live beyond today's symposium.
Right on.
Actually, there was one question in the chat in my group. We had such great presentations that we didn't have time for questions. And one of our presenters, it was, sorry, let me see. I don't know if they're here in the group. If not, then we won't be able to do it. Is Melanie and Brenda and Cherish, are they here in the group?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Brenda. Thank you. Thank you. One of the comments in the chat was talking about the difference between the incomes in African-American incomes and white incomes. So can you talk about that part of your presentation for everybody? And because they were surprised to hear that statistic, and that really makes a distinction. So maybe you can talk about that statistic.
Yeah, I could do brief about that. So basically what I was talking about in that particular part is that African Americans with an annual income of, I believe it was 50 to 60,000, are exposed to more heavy metals, toxins, and air pollutions, dangerous air pollutions than average white people who make annually around 10,000. And that just shows environmental racism right there. Even though an African American is making more than a white person, they are still going to be downgraded in this society and still get put in the worst neighborhoods with air pollutions, or have to pay even more, but still live in harmful situations and environments in society.
Very, very important. Thank you so much for talking with us about that, because a lot of people will say, you know, oh, it's not racism. It is where the different neighborhoods of where people live. And our work shows over and over and over again that that's not the case. Okay. So thank you for that. Any other questions from our presenters that we didn't have a chance to ask?
I want to just make a comment. I was really impressed with I keep using these two words, but they seem to apply, the depth and breadth of topics, because it was a huge range from actual environmental to community to the self and the presentation. And that the other thing that I appreciated is that the presentations were so well researched. It wasn't just, this is my opinion or this is how I feel, but it might have been my opinion and this might be how I felt. But let me back it up with some real facts and figures. So I appreciated that it wasn't just opinion, and that the students took the extra step for an academic rigor to actually do the research on it and substantiate their arguments. So bravo. And I'm going to put Talia and Melody on the spot as to what were the highlights for you while you have been working on this project.
Well, I think I've been talking, I mean, we've been talking about this for months and we've been planning for months. And one of the things that's great is that, we're so passionate about teaching. We're so passionate about anti-racism work. And now we get to actually do something about it. So it's nice to talk about it and to teach about it, teach each other about it. But I think this symposium is like, it's gonna create waves of impact. Like we're gonna send the recordings of this to the authors of Tell Me Who You Are, because well, I don't know if you can see it. Oh, there it goes. Because they have impacted us and we plan on impacting other people down the road. So that's really exciting for me.
For me, it's been great seeing my students excel in the ways that they did in the presentations. I knew they were stars, but it was just great to see them shine. And it was great to experience that shine in the presence of other people and for other people to recognize how intelligent, how articulate, how informed, not just my students, even though I'm going to give mine a shout out, but everyone is or was as they were presenting during this symposium. I thought that for me, that was the big aha relief moment. But I also do want to acknowledge everyone who worked to make this happen. I thought that was actually another standout, just having the opportunity to work with my colleagues, to have students who I work with in other capacities all come together. It was all hands on deck and we actually were able to actualize this event. So for me, that was the other highlight of today.
Michael?
Thank you, Michael. So I just want to say that, if this subject matter is important to you, if this, if you've been particularly intrigued by something that's, been discussed or said here, provide that feedback to, your professors, to your deans, to all of these things, because the more demand for these sorts of classes, for this sorts of material that the school knows about, the more that we can respond to that demand and actually put more of those classes into place. I know that, Professor Parker's been doing some work on environmental racism in her first year experience class, but, what if there were some additional courses on environmental racism, within various departments from a variety of angles? Talk to the library too. We can, if there's particular materials that you're interested in getting, we can, look into that, but more, follow any excitement that's actually been, generated here and try to, push for more of these sorts of things that you're interested in.
Thanks, Michael. Any other questions or comments from the presenters? Was this as exciting as you thought it was going to be? Was it as fearful as you thought it was going to be? Did you have to imagine the entire audience naked in order to be able to present and feel comfortable and confident? Because you all came off as so professional and prepared. And as an audience, that's what we appreciate. I don't think there's anything more irritating than attending an event where somebody sounds like they haven't even thought about what they were going to speak to or talk to. But in this case, every presentation that I stepped in on showed professionalism, preparation, and caring for the audience. So thanks to all of you, and any questions or comments that you might have about your opportunity to showcase yourself today.
I actually have one more comment. I did see that a couple of the student presenters provided emoji responses. So we'll go with the hearts and the smiles and say that it was good.
Okay.
I just want to remind, or actually kind of build off of Michael's previous comment about informing us about this experience. I do want to say that a survey will be provided to you all shortly, so please fill it out. It'll take just a moment of your time, but the feedback is really valuable. So if you could be sure to respond to the surveys and get those back in, they'll be out, like I said, pretty soon.
Anything else, Talia?
No, I have nothing else.
Well, it looks like we're ahead of schedule then, which I don't think will hurt anybody's feelings when our time's so precious, but this was well worth the investment. And it went so fast too. It's like, you know, I didn't even look at my clock the entire presentation. So it was interesting, good pace, and appreciate the effort of the instructors who coordinated their students, and also to all the students who really put their heart and soul into this. So thank you so much. Anything else, Talia?
No, that's it. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.